gentlemen, our next speaker is someone whose expertise has been pivotal in tailoring connectivity for diverse applications. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Shyam Prabhakar, Mardikar President, Group CTO Mobility at Reliance Jio. He will enlighten us on tailoring connectivity for diverse application. With demonstrated leadership in experience in telecommunication business spanning network and IT domains in strategy, planning, engineering, and operation across India and Europe with the major telecoms in the world, Mr. Mardikar is a successful technology thought leader. Without further ado, please put your hands together for Mr. Mardikar, everyone.
So much. Pleasure to be here as usual. Thank you, Pradeep, for giving us the privilege to be here. And these events are actually something which we all look forward, openly discuss a lot of big issues. I will start where Prashant left. So first a small, Chinese, I think nobody talks about Chinese these days. So I'll talk about, there are three famous Chinese curses, ages old, centuries old. And first curse says, may you live in interesting times. And there cannot be a more interesting time in telecom in India, in this place at this point of time. So I think to the point, we are all lucky to be here, fortunate to be here. I think these are interesting times, fun times, and these are going to stress us out one way or the other, I think positive or negatively. A recap, because we've been hearing a lot of criticism about 5G in India. So just a quick recap. We started a year back as an industry. I think IMC, October we announced, and by Diwali, end October we started. Almost 10 months. 10 months down the line. As of this month, we at Reliance Jio will complete 900,000 live 5G cells in the country. Close to 1 million, 900,000. I think this is the fastest rollout anywhere in the world so far. I think we were close to 1 million. I think come Diwali or just after Diwali, we might actually touch 1 million 5G cells. Nobody has deployed 1 million 5G cells in less than a year. So that's one. On whether it works. Today, out of our 450 million customers, more than 50 million customers are using 5G. How much it works? So as an industry or as a company, at Reliance Jio, globally, the world consumes almost, let's say, 300 to 400 crore GBs of data every day. 320 is the precise number if I look at all the reports. Prashant and his team and other such fellows actually publish those reports very diligently, and the current number is hovering around some 300, 320 crore GBs on a daily basis globally. Reliance Jio does 32 crore GB out of it. 10%, and this is just one company in the country. 10% of global data is already on one company, and out of this 10%, more than 4 crore GBs, Pradeep, is already 5G. So I think, it can't get any better to again build on the point which Prashant was making. I think we have seen it big, fast, and really penetrative with this scale. We are a consuming society. We are a digitally consuming society. We spoke about Chowdi Bazaar. I can speak about Northeast. We can speak about highways and railways. I think the connectivity is almost all pervasive. The use of connectivity is getting bigger. My agenda over the next 10-15 minutes is just to seed those thoughts in your heads on how this is going to morph, how this is going to change, and what fundamental difference. In fact, TV mentioned this. We were discussing a while just before we came into this room, is one of the biggest myths which I want to kind of take away out of this session is 5G is not 4G plus or 3G plus plus or 2G plus plus. It's something significantly different, and sooner we understand it, better our ability to use it, to manifest it, to monetize it, and to drive it from the other perspective. And one other thing I want to pick from Prashant's brilliant presentation was the change in mindset, the change in skill set of people. It is about relearning. We're all professionals here for decades now, and you remember there have been these HR related or learning related curves, and design thinking was the last big thing which has happened. Everybody was talking about all professionals and leaders get updated into something called design thinking. I believe that needs to now give away to what I call digital thinking. And digital thinking has a totally different framework, a different concept. You're talking about, and again, I mean, to glamorize it, you can talk about using chatbots and AI and ML and GPTs and generative things on machine learning. But very simplistically, it is how do you process, use the current data sets you have? How do you process and use your understanding of what you have in a digital version to kind of make it bigger and better? That is digital thinking, and it should cut across. It's not a technical domain anymore. I think business leaders, finance leaders, go-to-market guys, technologists, of course, need to now unlearn some of their old baggages and relearn it. And all of this, I believe, will be, and Prime Minister Modi has called rightly this decade as the techade. And this decade will be built by people who are actually more relevant to what I call digital thinking, the way of digital working, and that is where the groundwork will be made, where people who understand this and technology which can enable this will converge, and it will not be more of the same as we were discussing. It would be something radically different, which will radically kind of get into the way we interact. In fact, I keep on talking about for almost now 7-8 years, my story of 3 V's, 2001 to 2001 was 10 was decade of voice, 2011 to 2020 was decade of video, and this decade is the decade of virtuality. And this virtuality is going to morph into, so from digital connectivity to digital consumption to digital living. And this decade will be of digital living, almost all what we do. And 5G and such like technologies are going to be backbone of this. And how is 5G different? One, and the most important part, it is not connectivity only anymore. It is significantly beyond connectivity. The hyperconnectivity is, of course, at the backbone. We are talking about GBPS in the pocket, but that's not it. We are also talking about its ability to compute on the fly, its ability to distribute that compute on the network itself. So unlike 4G and the technologies below, where the compute and the IT and the data centers infrastructure was all kind of totally alien to the connectivity line, and somebody needs to merge and converge it, today it is kind of embedded. And that actually manifests into 2 or 3 very, very specific advantages. I'll talk about some of them, but that's one. And with connectivity, with compute comes storage, which means I am not only carrying the bits and bytes from point A to point B like I did in 4G. I am now also understanding, processing, and dealing with those bits and bytes as I carry them. Make the right set of decisions. Understand what the consumer is going through or consumption pattern is, and use this. And this is being done by a very strong underlying software platform. And this is where the value of hypercompute and hyperconnectivity clubbing together comes together. And this makes the network what we call as an elastic network. This makes the network what we call as an adaptive network. This makes the network what we call as an aware network. And if the network is aware, if the network is elastic, if the network is adaptive, then that rainbow spanning makes sense. That red is for service A, blue is for service B, green is for service C, and so on and so forth. Each service independently and comprehensively handled by the right resources in the right manner from one perspective. That's 5G for him, for you. And these variants of compute, storage, and connectivity then play out as what we call as the coupling of connectivity on digital. This first top part of the chart is only about connectivity. If you look at connectivity, you're talking about coverage, you're talking about capacity, and you're talking about programming that coverage and capacity. But what are the underlay components that are going to be used on this coverage and capacity layer? We are talking about resource handling, I think, and nobody can understand resource management better than all of us in India. We are a demand-intensive country. We are a high-density, high-footfall country. We've been doing our benchmarkings with the rest of the world, and we don't compare ourselves, our Delhis and Mumbais to New Yorks or Manhattans or let's say Londons of the world. We compare them to Beijings and Shanghais of the world, or Tokyos or Jakartas of the world. But even in these places where we have hyper-density of people, our footfall, our density of consumption, our density of demand of those resources, the 5G resources, the 4G resources, are order of magnitude 1:8, 1:10 times more. How do we use those resources right? And that is where, see, one of the questions which everybody asks us is, how do you operate in a in a $2 ARPU. And the standard and the right answer is the economies of scale. But to get to those economies of scale, you need to sweat the asset in a way nobody has done before. So what is a luxury for a Far Eastern operator or a European or an American operator is a necessity for us. This is like our roads. We don't have bad roads, 8-lane roads in Delhi. But you see those 8-lane roads get choked because nobody can actually give the traffic profile, the demand profile like we do. I drove in the morning from Gurgaon to Moria, and it's one of the best roads internationally. I mean, you can't get a better road. But you still have those jams because beyond the point, the demand is going to burst open. And that is where the ability to and this is what one of the biggest things of 5G is. Use the resources very, very efficiently. So we have extra spectrum, we have 100 megahertz of midband, let's say, compared to 50, 60 megahertz of what we had in 4G. But our ability to use those resource blocks, as we call it, much. Then the whole AI, ML, and again, I don't want to confuse you guys with jargon, but the whole story of AI and ML is understanding that data and processing that data in the right manner. It could be a very, very simple algorithm. Again, the road example is okay. That traffic from Delhi to Gurgaon is higher in the morning and other way in the evening. How do you use this data set to take care of the traffic? Do you use 2 more lanes downstream in the morning and 2 more lanes upstream in the morning? 5G does that. That's artificial intelligence. How do you manage traffic on holidays? How do you manage traffic when IPL final is being played? Resource management and understanding those resources and allocating those resources. Edge compute. I spoke about the Holy Trinity. I spoke about compute and storage being part of 5G. Now, this is where the rubber hits the road. How do you get a compute system now flowing on the pipe which is carrying 5G, right up to the user, closer to the user, closer to the premise, on-premise, very near premise, mid-premise. How do you do that? That's your edge compute. Your deep data analytics. Hundreds of billions of records, and again, I mean, Prashant did touch upon this fact. How do we use these hundreds of billions of data points which we generate every day to make it better? The only way to make it better is to use this compute and storage over these data points and process them in the right manner, to allocate the resources better. And all of this was totally unheard of on 4G. And that is how 5G is different. Security, Pawan is here, he will talk about it, I am sure, more. But security with the amount, if we are living digitally, that means we are exposed everywhere on digital. How do you make sure that the security now becomes native? It's not that darwaja band karne ke baad bahar se ek tala lagaya. That's how we used to do it in 4G. We used to have a chief information security officer coming from outside saying, oh, please bar the access, please. Here, the machine itself needs to justify and define. How do you do access control? How do you deny a DOS? How do you take care of all man-in-the-middle issues? That is now native to the technology, and there is no other way it cannot be because of the scale, because of the expanse, and because of the complexity of the data flowing in. Because if the compute is spread, it actually opens up all the more kind of holes in the system to be intercepted, to be used. And unless you have a very, very solid, and that is where the standalone network, which we keep on talking about, hyper-secure network, encrypted network, super encrypted network, those are becoming important. Internet of Things is a clear example which everybody understands will go. But if we use these components in the right manner, in the right fashion, we should be able to do. This is where we are today when we talk about this. And this is why our more of the same is not working. Because when we look at a service, when we look at a capability, we actually look at only one side and we just pick that up and say, okay, this is how we need to build a service. Because this is how we have learned historically. If I am giving a connectivity service, I will only focus on connectivity. If I am giving you a security-based system, I will only talk about security. But again, I mean, to spread it is to understand this holistically. Can we take a step back? Do not mistake trees for the woods and go ahead and do something which we build as a construct holistically. We do not actually get biased or prejudiced or predilected by anything which is just one of the part of the whole and not mentioned on the whole part of it. So that's very, very important thing. How do we understand this? And this is where the whole digital thinking comes into picture. This is where this understanding of it is beyond connectivity comes into picture. This is where the understanding of compute is on the network itself comes into picture. And how do you merge all of these together and then create services very, very specifically? Now, these services we've been talking for ages now. And again, Prashant spoke about some of them. I've also picked 3 or 4 of standard ones. But the point I am making here is not about services. The point I am making here is the components of 5G that will get built into. And if you'll see, all of them are different. A different service needs to be built from. So if you're talking about a media and entertainment service, something like air fiber, next week, 19th, Tuesday, we are launching, most of you have heard our famous air fiber service, and we believe that is going to bridge the gap of 30 million homes connected to 300 million homes connected. In fact, a chairman has mentioned an aspiration of 200 million homes already. Now, how do we move from that 30 million home to 200 million home? What construct is going to build it? Can we just go ahead and give connectivity? It is not going to work. We've been trying this for decades. You need speed, you need latency sensitivity, you need awareness on the network, you need distributed edge to actually garner and consume and supply data of that scale. Imagine these 30 million homes becoming 100 and 200 million homes, the amount of data they will generate. An average home user today in India generates almost 25 times more data than a mobile user. A mobile user already is generating 20 GB. Our 5G users are actually touching 40 GBs when they consume data today. Now imagine this 20 GB a day, 40 GB a day becomes 400 GB a day on a monthly basis, a TB a day on a monthly basis. And the world has shown these consumption patterns. I can't just actually lay a pipe and forget about it. It will be like our choked toll roads. I will have to intelligently distribute the points of consumption, the sources of consumption, the CDNs, the caches, the latency sensitive application host everywhere. And so maybe 4 components, and I'm trying to hyper simplify, but just giving you an idea. It comes to agriculture. You don't bother about speed. I do not need Gbps speed to hook up a sensor in a field. But I need a compute at the edge. But I need a massive amount of sensors distributed over the field. How do I then now morph the whole network towards this service where speed is not important? Latency is also not important. What is important is concurrency, hundreds of thousands and millions of sensors pushing data. And where will this data get consumed? As close to the point of consumption. So I need to distribute it. You get to education, for example. Awareness, what kind of data is being flowing? Is it video? Is it textual? How do I make the whole service much more kind of aligned to what the student-teacher interaction is happening? How do I again distribute that? So distribution comes here. Speed can come here. So when you create multiple services, when you create these service portfolios, it is almost radically different from what we used to do as telcos, where we used to connect point A to point B and then assume that somebody else will take over from there. We now need to be aware, we now need to be aligned, we now need to be computing on the fly and driving this. That's one. And then again, the underlying digital thinking part of it, the underlying data analytics part of it, the AI part of it comes into picture. This is the distributed intelligence part. This is the whole closed looping chart. It looks a bit complicated, but if you read it, it's pretty simple. You have to plan in an automated way for millions and billions of people or machines or industries or enterprises in a very, very data-driven manner. Radio planning is now just one component of network planning, one small component of network planning. What happens after radio planning? Do you understand what kind of devices are consuming? Do you understand what kind of device-led demand is coming? What kind of service you are trying to do? What kind of traffic is going to hit? And finally, how is it going to morph into the right set of infrastructure? Where is your edge data center? Where is your... So we spoke about fiber and power, and I believe my version of roti kapda and makan of telecom is tower, fiber and power. Unless you have these in the right density, in the right proliferation, tower should be there, it should be powered up. Our grid, our electrical grid, all of us know. So batteries and diesel generators and now non-conventional energy sources, and finally power. Because if you're talking about GBPS and TBPS of aggregated data, you can't just do it unless you have the right set of fiber. So that infrastructure engineering gets into in. And then finally, at the end of the day, the customer who is the king. What is he doing? How is he consuming? How I can make it better for him? And this digital framework, with those digital components, over that trinity of connectivity, compute and storage in a secure manner is what will define. And we need to, and we are grappling with this. I mean, let's also be, we are not an expert. As an industry, we don't know this. We are not used to this. This is a sea change for us. And that is why these criticisms come that there is nothing happening. What will it give? But we need to understand when things change, it is people who are the weakest link in the chain. If people understand change and start that digital thinking faster, I think the technology is there to serve you. Charlie Brown said this, that there is no greater burden in life than that of having potential. I think if 5G would have been a person, this would have been 5G's statement. Thank you so much.